On this day in history, we remember the remarkable individuals who shaped our world. Welcome to Who Died Today in History, where we honor their legacies. From artists to leaders, their impact lives on. If you find their stories meaningful, like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay connected. Robert Downey Sr., the Maverick filmmaker known for his satirical and subversive works, passed away from Parkinson's disease on July 7, 2021, at the age of 85. His death was natural, yet quietly symbolic, marking the end of an era defined by countercultural rebellion, underground cinema, and fearless artistic experimentation. As a key figure in American independent film of the 1960s and 1970s, Downey Sr.'s passing reminded the world of a time when creative expression often clashed with social norms and political complacency. Downey Sr. rose to prominence with cult classics such as Putney Swope, 1969, a biting satire of race, capitalism, and the advertising world. The film, released amid the civil rights movement and cultural upheaval of the late 60s, embodied a spirit of defiance. His unique blend of absurdism, guerrilla filmmaking, and dark comedy offered a stark contrast to the polished narratives of Hollywood. His works didn't seek mass appeal. They confronted audiences, forcing them to question the systems they lived in. His death did not provoke the public spectacle or global mourning reserved for mainstream icons, but it stirred deep reverence within film circles. To cinephiles and artists, it was a moment to reflect on the roots of modern indie cinema and the trailblazers who challenged convention. In many ways, Downey Sr.'s passing amplified his legacy, prompting retrospectives of his work and renewed appreciation for his influence on generations of filmmakers, including his son, Robert Downey Jr. Downey Sr.'s death and the quiet dignity with which he departed also reflected the enduring challenges of aging in a culture that often glorifies fame over substance. Despite his significant contributions to American cinema, he remained largely outside the commercial spotlight, a reality faced by many artists who prioritize authenticity over popularity. His legacy lives on through restored screenings, critical essays, and documentaries, most notably Senior, 2022, a deeply personal tribute by his son, which explores both the man and his unconventional vision. Through this, the world is reminded that we honor the dead not only through grand memorials but through the preservation and understanding of their work. In remembering Robert Downey Sr., we confront our own relationship with art, rebellion, and memory. His story illustrates how mortality may end a life, but it can also ignite a deeper conversation about the values, voices, and visions that shaped history and continue to shape the future. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the celebrated creator of Sherlock Holmes, died of a heart attack on July 7, 1930, at the age of 71. His death was peaceful and natural, occurring in his garden in Crowborough, England, as he held the hand of his wife and whispered his final words, "You are wonderful." For a man who had chronicled the adventures of one of literature's most deductive minds, his own final moments were tender and human, reminding the world that even the most rational voices eventually yield to mortality. Doyle's death came at a time when the world was between two global wars and experiencing rapid shifts in science, religion, and culture. A trained physician and a man of science, Doyle had, paradoxically, become an outspoken proponent of spiritualism later in life, a belief in communication with the dead. This transition reflected the broader anxieties of his era, particularly after the massive loss of life in World War I and the Spanish flu pandemic. For many, Doyle's embrace of the spiritual realm seemed at odds with the cold logic of Holmes, yet it also illustrated a deeper human longing to find meaning and connection beyond death. The immediate consequence of his passing was a wave of tributes from literary communities, spiritualist societies, and fans around the globe. While his home stories had already made him a literary icon, his death revived interest in his broader body of work, including his historical novels and supernatural writings. His funeral drew thousands, and spiritualists held seances in his honor, hoping to receive one last message from the man who had devoted his final years to bridging science and spirit. Doyle's death did not shift the trajectory of history in a political sense, but it cemented his place as a figure who embodied the tensions of his time: reason versus faith, fact versus mystery. Through Holmes, he gave the world a hero of logic. Through his personal beliefs, he revealed the emotional and spiritual depth that reason alone cannot satisfy. Today, Doyle is immortalized in countless adaptations, statues, and scholarly studies. Sherlock Holmes continues to inspire new generations across media, a testament to the power of well-drawn characters and enduring ideas. In commemorating Doyle, we engage in an ongoing dialogue about truth, belief, and the desire to outwit death, not with a magnifying glass, but with imagination. Veronica Lake, the sultry screen siren of the 1940s, died on July 7, 1973, at just 50 years old. Her death was the result of hepatitis and acute kidney injury brought on by years of heavy alcohol use. Once a luminous presence in Hollywood, known for her iconic peekaboo hairstyle and roles in film noirs like This Gun for Hire and The Blue Dahlia, Lake's later years were marked by obscurity, poverty, and illness. Her death, though natural, bore the weight of emotional and cultural tragedy. It symbolized the cost of fame in an era that devoured its stars once the lights dimmed. Lake's rise in the 1940s was meteoric. She embodied a new kind of femme fatale, enigmatic, alluring, and independent. Her image defined wartime glamour, and her style even influenced women workers during World War II. Yet the very persona that brought her fame also became her prison. Her studios struggled with her reported mood swings and rebellious attitude, and as Hollywood transitioned into the 1950s, Lake, who was only in her 30s, was labeled difficult, and her career declined. By the time of her death, she had faded from public view, working as a waitress and living under assumed names. Her final years were lonely and unglamorous, reflecting how the studio system could be both star maker and executioner. The immediate response to her death was quiet. It did not generate the outpouring of grief seen with other Hollywood icons. Yet it sparked a reevaluation of her contributions, and over time, interest in her work and legacy grew. Her autobiography, Veronica, the autobiography of Veronica Lake, published shortly before her death, gave voice to her struggle and humanity beyond the screen. Lake's death underscored the era's challenges for women in film: expectations of perfection, limited roles, and brutal consequences for those who defied control. Her legacy today is one of reclamation. Film scholars and enthusiasts have resurrected her place in cinema history, recognizing her impact on noir and feminist readings of classic Hollywood. Tributes, retrospectives, and even fashion nods to her hairstyle keep her memory alive. In remembering Veronica Lake, we confront the fragility behind fame and the enduring need to humanize the legends we admire. Her story reminds us that how we die and how we are remembered often says as much about the society we leave behind as it does about the life we lived. Dorian Lee, one of the earliest and most influential fashion models in history, passed away on July 7, 2008, at the age of 91 due to natural causes. Her death marked the end of a remarkable chapter in the evolution of beauty, celebrity, and femininity in the 20th century. Known as one of the first supermodels, Lee's career helped define post-World War II glamour and laid the foundation for modern fashion culture. Her passing, though quiet compared to the tumult of her heyday, invited reflection on the societal ideals she both represented and resisted. During the 1940s and 1950s, Lee was more than just a pretty face. She was the face. Appearing on dozens of Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, and Life covers, she became a muse for top designers and photographers, notably Richard Avedon. Her poised elegance offered a contrast to the wartime utilitarian aesthetic, ushering in a renewed emphasis on beauty and aspiration. But behind the camera, Lee's life was far more complex. She was a single mother, entrepreneur, and later a writer. Her ability to shape her own narrative, especially in a male-dominated industry, reflected the emerging, if limited, independence women were beginning to claim in the post-war era. Lee's death did not cause the shockwaves of a political figure or pop icon, but it did close the curtain on a transformative era in fashion and media. In an age now flooded with influencers and digital fame, Lee's story reminds us of a time when style, mystique, and substance coexisted. Her legacy lives on not only through images, but also through the paths she opened for generations of women to follow. Models who are now seen as voices, entrepreneurs, and cultural forces. The story of Dorian Lee's life and death also echoes humanity's fascination with beauty and its fleeting nature. We immortalize such figures through fashion retrospectives, documentaries, and biographies, not simply to remember their appearance, but to understand their influence. Lee herself challenged the superficiality of her image by writing candidly about her experiences, revealing the pressures and contradictions of life in the spotlight. Her death offers a moment to reflect on how we define power, influence, and legacy. Through art, media, and storytelling, we preserve not just a face, but a force, one that shaped how the world looked at beauty and how beauty looked back. Alfredo Di Stefano, one of football's most influential figures, died on July 7, 2014 at the age of 88 from a heart attack. Though his death was natural, it came just days after his 88th birthday and occurred in Madrid, the city most closely linked to his legendary career. His passing marked not only the loss of an extraordinary athlete, but also the symbolic end of an era in which football transitioned from a regional pastime to a global cultural force. Di Stefano's legacy was forged during the 1950s and 60s, a time when Europe was recovering from the ravages of World War II, and sport became a unifying, almost mythical arena for pride and identity. Born in Argentina and representing 3 different national teams, Argentina, Colombia, and Spain, Di Stefano's transcontinental career reflected the complex politics and fluid identities of post-war global football. Most famously, his move to Real Madrid in 1953, amid a fierce tug-of-war with rivals FC Barcelona, would help redefine the club and European football itself. Di Stefano led Real Madrid to 5 consecutive European Cup titles and helped pioneer the idea of the complete footballer. His style, defined by versatility, intelligence, and tireless energy, embodied the mid-century ideal of individual excellence serving the collective, a value deeply held in a continent seeking unity and reconstruction. The immediate aftermath of his death was marked by immense tributes from fans, clubs, and fellow athletes. Real Madrid held a public viewing at the Santiago Bernabéu Stadium, where thousands came to pay their respects. The football world paused, not just to mourn a player, but to honor an architect of the modern game. His death reinforced his legendary status, amplifying his myth beyond statistical greatness to cultural immortality. In remembering Di Stefano, we also recognize the evolving relationship between mortality and memory in sports. Athletes like him become more than men, they become symbols. His legacy is preserved in bronze statues, stadium murals, and FIFA tributes, but also in the style of play and philosophy that still echo in the game today. Ultimately, Alfredo Di Stefano's passing reminds us that while greatness on the pitch fades with time, the values it represents, resilience, creativity, and unity, continue to shape how we remember and celebrate those who changed the world through sport. Dame Flora Robson, a distinguished British actress whose career spanned stage and screen, passed away from natural causes on July 7, 1984, at the age of 82. Her death, though not dramatic, marked the quiet fading of one of the great performers of Britain's classical acting tradition. A master of both Shakespearean tragedy and historical drama, Robson's work reflected the cultural values of a generation that prized dignity, discipline, and emotional depth in the arts. Flora Robson came to prominence during the 1930s and 1940s, an era shaped by economic hardship and global conflict. In many ways, her roles mirrored the stoicism and gravitas of the times. She was celebrated for her portrayals of powerful historical figures, most notably Queen Elizabeth I in Fire over England, 1937, and again in The Sea Hawk, 1940. These performances, delivered during the lead-up to and height of World War II, resonated deeply with British audiences. Her depiction of a strong, resilient monarch was not just artistic, it was political. She became, in effect, a symbol of national endurance. Her death came at a time when British theatre was shifting from the grandeur of the repertory system to more modern and experimental forms. As such, Robson's passing was seen as the end of an era, one where actors were classically trained and revered for their command of language and stage presence. The theatrical community mourned not just a beloved figure, but the slow retreat of a style that had defined mid-20th century British drama. Though she never courted the kind of international fame that many of her peers did, Robson's death reinforced her legend among those who valued the subtle strength of her performances. She was memorialized not with grand spectacle, but with quiet tributes in London's West End and through retrospectives of her most compelling roles. Her legacy lives on in the tradition of strong female portrayals in British theatre and film, paving the way for future generations of actresses. Flora Robson's death reminds us of the quiet, dignified exits that still leave lasting impressions. Through careful archiving, biographical works, and film preservation, she remains immortalized not as a celebrity, but as a craftswoman, one who shaped the emotional landscape of her time. In a world increasingly dazzled by spectacle, her story encourages us to remember the lasting power of grace and artistry. Bumpy Johnson died on July 7, 1968, of a heart attack while dining at Wells Restaurant in Harlem, New York. A natural death that belied the tumultuous life he had led. Known as the Godfather of Harlem, Johnson's life straddled the line between notorious criminal and respected community figure. His passing marked the end of an era for Harlem, a neighborhood long shaped by the complex interplay of organized crime, racial dynamics, and cultural pride. Johnson rose to power during the Harlem Renaissance and Prohibition, navigating the underworld alongside, and often against, notorious mob figures like Dutch Schultz and Lucky Luciano. Though heavily involved in racketeering, gambling, and drug trade, Johnson also cultivated a Robin Hood image, offering protection and support to Harlem residents and aligning himself with civil rights voices. His paradoxical nature, ruthless enforcer and neighborhood benefactor, reflected the deep tensions of his era: systemic racism, economic disparity, and the blurred lines between legitimacy and survival in Black communities marginalized by mainstream society. The timing of his death was symbolically potent. 1968 was a year of seismic upheaval in America. Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy had both been assassinated. Civil unrest surged in cities across the country, and the Vietnam War raged on. Johnson's death, though not violent, resonated with the unrest of the time, marking the loss of another powerful black figure, albeit from the underworld, during a year when leadership and direction within African American communities were increasingly under threat. His legacy only grew after death. The mythos surrounding Bumpy Johnson expanded, particularly through media portrayals in films like American Gangster and series like Godfather of Harlem, where he was cast as a complicated anti-hero. These adaptations, while dramatized, contributed to the enduring fascination with his life, immortalizing him as both a product of and a force against the oppressive systems of his time. In reflecting on Johnson's death, we confront humanity's ongoing entanglement with power, justice, and memory. Figures like Bumpy Johnson are remembered not just for their deeds, but for what they represented, a mirror to the societal failures and the resilience of communities striving for dignity. Through stories, television, and cultural memory, we preserve these lives not as mere criminals or saints, but as emblematic of the complex truths we carry across generations.